Today's MTDCNC documentary sees me at Churchill College in Cambridge. Now, I'm not here to review history, in fact very different, I'm here to learn about the future. I'm at the Industrial Sustainability Conference. So Will, I'm excited about the event. What are we going to learn today?
Industrial sustainability. How are we going to make the things we need and consume with fewer resources going forward? And how do these new business models become standard so that it's not just a few examples being greener, but it's a standard business model for the future?
And how could this apply to somebody watching our videos, an engineering company, for example?
Well, actually, precision engineering companies are a really good example of using one level of the Centre for Industrial Sustainability's programme, which is eco-efficiency. Imagine eco-efficiency at the very basic level could be changing light bulbs from the traditional tungsten bulb to an LED which uses less electricity. Easy, low-hanging fruit. For a precision engineer, they're using a lot of coolant and water in the machine tool, but also they're generating a lot of swarf. Now, some companies are recycling that swarf. Some of the ideas that the guys in this program are involved with are how you could make money from selling the swarf. Now, if you're doing that already, back to the coolant, could you use less coolant but still have the same effect? Or could you use a different coolant that's more environmentally safe?
I can think of a ton of them actually. I mean, they generate a lot of heat as well. But you've mentioned one level, the light bulb scenario. What are the other levels that we'll learn about today?
So the sensor has, I think, 4 levels, but if we simplify them to 3, eco-efficiency, light bulbs and coolant. The next level is eco-factory. So if you're designing or even re-engineering a factory from scratch, how would you build it to be more sustainable? That's the physical building and the machines and the processes inside. It might be reducing the space between components and machines so that you're using less energy, but it would certainly involve things like using building materials, roofing and insulation so that you're using less electricity and energy in the building. And then the third level is really very ambitious. Interestingly, Steve Evans, who runs this centre, says it's one of the levels that have had the most uptake in the last couple of years, and that's systems re-engineering or whole business architecture re-engineering, where you work with your supply chain, your OEM customers, and even governments to make that value chain much more sustainable all the way through.
It sounds costly and it sounds time-consuming. Am I going to adopt this?
I guess it's as much as you want to put into it. I mean, it's very easy to change a light bulb. If you want to make some more radical changes, it's going to cost you time and money. But I think the academics and the people involved in this project would say, if you put it in, you'll get it out. And I think the really exciting thing about this is that more and more companies and organisations involved in industrial sustainability are now looking at ways of making money, not just saving money and resources, but actually making money from waste.
So we can turn this to our advantage commercially as well then?
Absolutely. I mean, there was an amazing speaker this morning, Gunter Pauli from the Blue Economy. He's created a company. He invented the E-Cover detergent, and now he's gone on from strength to strength all over the world, turning normal business models on their head, literally. So, an example might be rather than burn the waste from coffee, you make a product from the coffee byproduct. And that could be, for example, put into coffee byproduct, the oil, removes odours from the atmosphere. So carpet makers are using that in their carpet fibres. There's lots of opportunities to actually commercialise waste.
Let's go and hear from some people talking.
So Martin Baxter from IEMA, what does your organisation do and how does it fit into the industrial sustainability agenda?
Okay, so we're a professional body of environment and sustainability practitioners who are working to transform their companies through more sustainable practices. We have about 15,000 individuals who are members of our organisation in about 100 countries around the world. So we're here to support them in terms of access to knowledge, understanding, leading research, but also to qualify them through their skills and capabilities so they can make a bigger difference in the workplace.
Is environmental auditing and examination in companies and organisations, is that a growing industry? Is it becoming more popular? Do people want to get your guys into firms to assess them?
Yes, certainly. I mean, there's an awful lot of work that's done on traceability, on certification of products in terms of their environmental capabilities, but also in terms of the footprint of an organisation itself. So it's a huge amount of interest in that. There's also got things like carbon accounting and carbon reporting. So you think about emissions trading scheme, you actually need to validate and verify the data and information behind that, because there's a lot of financial value behind it. So auditors in that regard are really important.
And it's not just about the green credentials of a business, it's also about value, isn't it? So your people are going in to perhaps extract more value from the company, like an auditor in other areas.
Yeah, so this is about not just reducing costs through better resource utilisation. So how can we make more of from the materials that we've got? But also then looking at how this connects into both supply chains and into better products. So if we can make our products more usable, more durable, change the materials that they have so they have a lower impact on the environment, that's really good. And then if we can work with our supply chains, then we can start to innovate in terms of better ways of doing things. So looking much more holistically across the whole value chain about how environment sustainability can drive better business and long-term success.
So that's Martin Baxter from the IEMA professional body that's got thousands of members around the world. What really interested me about what Martin was saying was the environmental auditing. And to think a decade ago that we would undertake such tasks in both small and large companies is almost beyond belief. But nowadays, they're not just doing it for the sake of proving that they're environmentally green, they're actually doing it for commercial gain.
So Richard Peace from Altro, your company is well known for its sustainability practices. Can you run through some of the metrics you've achieved and the sort of business processes that you're using to become a more sustainable company?
One of the things we've done a lot of work on over the last few years is the recycling of our product, and traditionally we manufacture safety flooring. It is a real challenge to recycle it because it does have very hard wearing materials such as aluminium oxide and silicon carbide in it, and so recycling it has been a real challenge. But we've done a lot of work on the processes to do that and how we incorporate it back into our product. But also linked to that is the actual mechanism of bringing that product back to site to recycle it. And one of the key things we've done, working with one of our key competitors, is to set up a scheme in the UK known as RecoFloor. And it's a mechanism by which product can be brought back to site so we can reprocess it and reuse it. And we've worked with a competitor to do that, recognising that some of these things have to be tackled at an industry level. We can't expect every flooring company to have its own recycling scheme and contractors on site to know which material it is and where they need to send it. So it is one of these cases where it does really have to be addressed at an industry level, and we have worked with our key competitors in the UK to achieve that.
In terms of business itself, is one of the key challenges with being sustainable actually making money from the sustainable practices? Because obviously in many cases the low-hanging fruit is to just do business as normal, do things easily the old way. That's not very sustainable, but it generally makes easier profits, so it's tough to make money from this?
I think it is. It is in many cases hard to do that, but I think to some extent we take the long-term view. It needs to be done, and society expects it to be done, and we cannot expect to have a business going forwards that doesn't address some of the more difficult challenges, and bringing material back and recycling and doing it in a cost-effective way is one of those really difficult things. But looking forward in the future of the business and the industry over the long term, we need to somehow make that happen.
Brian Holliday from Siemens, why are you here today?
Well, Cambridge is a corporate key institution for Siemens globally. That means that as a Tier 1 research partner, of course, we're looking for ways to engage with them in industry, energy, healthcare and infrastructure, in those fields. Today I'm talking about digitisation and manufacturing, and I'm going to be arguing the case that digital tools can enable greater industrial sustainability, and we're looking at areas like the reduction of energy used in manufacturing plants, the reduction of materials used in manufacturing, and indeed an improvement in productivity, the reduction of time taken to make things as well.
So Brian, as digital technology pervades more and more in manufacturing, how do you think this data acquisition evolution we're going through will help sustainability?
Well, data is key. I guess we're all aware of the Internet of Things, and in manufacturing we're thinking much more now about the industrial Internet of Things. In practical terms, that means we're collecting much more data about the products that we're designing, the factories that we both design and operate, and the supply chain. So we can think much more about provenance of the product, carrying data associated with that through its life. But we're increasingly thinking about how do we collect data from the factory itself. And there is much unused data in factories today. So for example, many of the parameters associated with the number of strokes on a valve or the maximum current consumed through a motor gives us indicators to the likely performance of technology or machines in the future as well, which may even help us with things like condition monitoring. So there are all manner of reasons for which collecting and then better analysing data will help to make manufacturing better.
So that was Brian Holliday, Managing Director of Siemens here in the UK. What do his words mean to us as manufacturers? Well, if you're a machinist or you run a machine shop, you'll be looking to get the best out of your cutting tool technologies and your machine tools. And to do that, you need to embrace things like Industry 4 and smart factories. And by embracing those and introducing those into your production processes, will be better for the environment.
So Stafford Riversimple, it's a sustainable business. What does it do?
So our main aim is to provide sustainable mobility. We are doing that through providing a radically efficient car through a mobility as a service model, whereby customers will pay a total cost of ownership monthly fee that includes everything, so the fuel, similar to a mobile phone contract is the analogy we use, which encourages us to be really efficient, which is why we've developed a really cool car that we're providing through the service contract.
The car is a standard car, so I couldn't use Riversimple to say have a BMW for a week. It's a single model, is it?
We are currently developing a two-seater model that we think meets the local need for a little run around that a lot of two-car families and individuals have. We are looking at future models that will seat 4 people and also a lightweight van. So we're developing the model with the current vehicle, although we're looking to expand that. And yeah, we're a car producer. Have a look at our website. You can see the car we're developing. It's really cool, very efficient. It runs on a fuel cell, designed in a very novel way. It's different to any other car you can buy, fundamentally, in the way it works, which makes it really efficient. And yeah, but it's the way we're selling it that's driven us to develop a different product. And it's linking that different business model with what you do differently is, I think, the really cool bit.
Now, Stafford, your company was sort of born out of an association with the University of Cambridge and Steve Evans. Can you explain that? And also, something about what you've seen at this conference over the last few years and any milestones that you think the sustainability agenda has reached?
Yeah, so Steve Evans, who's the head of the centre, is a good friend and mentor of my boss, Hugo Spowers, who started the company under kind of Steve's tutelage. We're still very closely affiliated as a centre, really encouraged to see the development of thinking in industrial sustainability. And one of the key kind of shifts I'm really picking up from a lot of, well, the theme of the conference and a lot of the presentations, and it's kind of linked to Riversimple in a way, because we're not only developing a new car and business model, but we're also developing a new governance system that's purpose-driven. And for me, we're almost at a threshold of moving from, to paraphrase quite pithily, doing less bad to being more good. Mm-hmm. And I think that is more purpose-driven. We've talked a lot over the past couple of days about ethics in business. Mike Barry from Plan A talked about them almost moving more towards a values-driven enterprise, and I think that's linked to sustainability.
That was Mike Barry from Plan A.
Marks and Spencer's, yeah. And I think that's indicative of a shift that's in the theme of the conference, and as usual, being more academically orientated at the kind of forefront of that, but I see that being spread through businesses, and there's a bit of a pattern that's emerging, I think, in the sustainability scene, I would say.
And that could trickle down from big businesses like Marks and Spencer and Toyota to the supply chain.
We hope so, and also trickle up from small businesses like ours to big businesses. I mean, I think that's kind of the cross-fertilisation works in both ways, but we also try and promote it within our supply chain too. So I think it's a great thing that everybody should think about and promote.
So Nick Pennell, how does your consultancy fit into the industrial sustainability programme?
Okay, so we've been consulting for quite some time, and we had many more customers asking us about sustainability. Could we have a sustainability strategy? We did that work, and what we found with all the companies that we worked with was that there was immense financial value around sustainability. So we founded Lavery Pennell on the basis of driving profitable businesses around sustainability, and that's how we got involved with the Industrial Sustainability Group at Cambridge.
Can you give me an example of a company that's making money from being, for want of a better word, greener?
But there are quite a few examples. One of the best examples, which is a classic example, is a company called Interface, who make carpet tiles, which might not sound the most interesting of things, but back in 1994 they set out on what they called Mission Zero, which was to have zero environmental impact by 2020. And they've been successfully pursuing that mission and making money whilst doing it.
Also, your own business, I believe, has started a spin-out from the consultancy which makes money from sustainable practices.
That's right. So some time ago, working with the Institute for Manufacturing here at Cambridge, we authored a report called The Next Manufacturing Revolution, which identified a lot of value from various sources of sustainability in manufacturing, one of which was remanufacturing. And about a year ago now, we started up a company called Ripe Office, which remanufactures office furniture and sells it into the UK market. And that's been very successful. It's been going about a year now, and it's growing really, really rapidly. We've successfully had a first round fundraise and continue to win large projects.
When companies look at this agenda, I suppose, sustainability, in the past, I think it would be fair to say some have not treated it as a priority because they have assumed that in order to save carbon and remove waste, it's going to cost money. As time moves on and the sustainability practices that we see here at the conference become more embedded, do you think more and more companies are seeing it as a way of not just saving, but also new business streams, new revenue streams?
Absolutely. We see more and more companies doing that. So many companies are still in the initial stages of thinking about sustainability from the point of view of efficiency, cost reduction, and there's still a lot of opportunities there. But as companies progress in their thinking, more and more of them are finding new value streams around their waste or remanufacturing, or potentially even new business models or new products that are more sustainable in themselves. And you see a lot of leading companies, Akzo Nobel, Henkel, a lot of the FMCG companies, Unilever and others, thinking about how do their products impact the overall sustainability of their value chains.
And what would you advise needs to happen for this to become more of a de rigueur standard practice in business across the board, not just for the champions that we can hold a candle to like Akzo Nobel or Toyota? How does it become standard?
I think there's two ways. One way is by building case studies of companies that have done this and the impact that it's had. There are still quite a few CEOs out there that say, "Oh, sustainability, it's I've got more worries about in my core business. I'll think about sustainability later." But if you can emphasize the fact that sustainability can add dramatic financial value to a business as well, it makes CEOs sit up and take notice. And clearly, alongside that is education of CEOs, because these changes, they affect the whole company, so they need to be led from the top.
I've been here as an observer for 2 days. There's an awful lot of brain dumping, intelligent people, a big community, lots of ideas and brainstorming. Can you tell me where it's all leading and some of the people who are involved in this project now?
Well, let's start with who's involved. If you'd been here in the community, it might be a surprise. There's lots of people from industry here, people from government, people from all parts of industry, from people who lead technology departments, people who lead supply chain departments, people who lead manufacturing departments, and we're all interested in solving very similar problems. We just want to get rid of much of what we see as incredibly stupid waste. So that shared interest is really important. When people come to visit this conference, we call it a conference, I don't think it feels like a conference. People visit because they want to talk with other people who have similar problems to themselves, people who've been spending 2 or 3 years trying to solve those problems as researchers, and people who've been spending 2 or 3 years trying to solve those same problems as practitioners. And when you're in the room, you don't really know whether you're speaking to an industrialist or a researcher, because we're all in it together.
So very relevant to real companies as well as academics. What about the machine tool industry, precision engineering, SMEs? I guess some of this research might look a little bit blue sky for those guys, but it's not, is it?
Well, the first thing that we've all learned over the last 20 years is how to reduce waste. And for those of us who've been on a sort of productivity efficiency drive for the last 40 years throughout our industrial careers, it might seem obvious that we've all been attacking waste for a long time and that we might have squeezed it to bits. But what we're squeezing is labour productivity, typically, and capital productivity. And 5 times larger than labour productivity is the money that we spend on parts, on materials, on energy, on water, on dealing with our waste. And as a production engineer, we've got very little training on squeezing that part of the system, finding the waste there and either not making it or finding a way to increase the value of those wastes. And that's what we've been concentrating on. Those are things that every factory, every process can deal with, whether it's dealing with swarf or coolant or energy or water. And that's the first stage that companies are going through in trying to move themselves to being more sustainable.
Okay, so that's one level. But in terms of the dialogue, I've been here, I think, coming to this conference on and off for about 4 years, and it does seem to have switched more from something that companies, quote unquote, should do for the environment to one of value. Can you tell me more about the value proposition of being greener in your operations?
Really good question, because I do believe many of these companies started out on the journey because it was something they felt they should do. And once you start rummaging around in your bins and you start going, well, hang on a minute, we must do this because there's, we don't want to be seen as people who are dumping our stuff on the rest of the world. But when you rummage around in your bins and go, wow, that's worth a lot of money. Oh, wait a minute, that's worth a lot of money. All of a sudden it just becomes good production engineering again, and it stops becoming some sort of ethical drive, and it goes back to being good engineers and good manufacturers and going, that's wasteful. I want to stop being wasteful and start adding value.
An example of a company making money from waste?
Some of the best examples that we've got at the moment in small scale terms, we're seeing companies like Elvis and Cressy, who are taking London Fire Brigade waste, the fire hoses, and turning those into high-class luxury handbags that retail at over £200. Free raw materials for a £200 product price is not a bad way of turning waste into money. That's rather niche. What we're also seeing in many companies, maybe one of the best examples is about an hour from here, an hour from Cambridge, is AB Sugar. And in their factory at Wissington, they take some of their waste heat from their sugar plant, some of the waste CO2 from their sugar plant, combine those together in a greenhouse, add tomato seeds, and what you've got is the second biggest tomato factory in Britain, made from waste. And so their 2 biggest raw ingredients are free.
Companies need to look at what they're doing as a byproduct and make a bit more money from it. So just briefly, Steve, your ambitions for the future. What does the centre and what does this agenda, if you like, need to do next in the next few years?
It's very easy. In the long term, there's going to be a very substantive change. We understand the technological changes that are coming through manufacturing. We know about Industry 4.0. We know that there's going to be technology everywhere, that manufacturing is going to become immensely productive in a way that we've understood historically as productive. But those same technologies, for example, are changing the scale logic. So instead of trying to make bigger factories next year than this year, we're going to make smaller factories. Well, what happens in 20 years' time when factories are able to be commercially efficient at a quarter of the size that they are today? One of the things that we would imagine happening is that those factories are going to spread themselves around. So we're going to see parts of factory processing happening in shops. We're going to see people going into the shops and customizing their clothing with the last op happening in front of them. And maybe they sign their name to it, or maybe they attach themselves to it in some other way and increase the value of a customized product to themselves. So the shape of manufacturing is going to change, and part of our research is helping people make better decisions now. We're making investment decisions over time periods that are going to be affected by these technologies. And we don't want to have lots of really poor sunk investment.
Yeah.
Industrial sustainability. Should we be interested in it? Well, yes, we should. And why? Because we have a responsibility to the environment and a responsibility to our industry.